Hi, my name is Kasia, and in this video I would like to share with you a tutorial on how to create custom date hierarchy trend charts in Tableau using a slider and only one additional calculation. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so let's get started with this view here in Tableau, as this is the chart that we will ultimately try to recreate at the end of this tutorial. So what do we have here? It looks like a very simple trend chart showing sales over order date. So each point here represents different quarters, so we can see what the sales were in each quarter. You can see the header is adjusted for the currently viewed level of granularity, same for the label. So it doesn't appear to be anything extraordinary. And you might be wondering, why do we need to go through this tutorial? What is so special about it? So I would like to draw your attention to this bottom section here at the next to the x-axis here, where we have those minus and plus buttons. Some of you might already recognize them, as we do have a very similar built-in default functionality of plus and minus buttons that allow users to interact with the chart in terms of changing the granularity levels. But these buttons are typically visible whenever someone hovers over the x-axis, which, as you can see, is not the case in here, as they are visible by default at all times. But they do work in a very similar fashion. So if I click on the plus button, you can see that the quarterly view has been now replaced with a monthly overview. Same goes for the weekly overview. So now I can see sales over weeks. Similarly, if I click on the minus buttons, the last view that I can see here is the yearly overview. So that's the highest level of aggregation here. And you can see that the minus button has disappeared now because we cannot have any further levels of aggregation at this point. Years is as much as we can show here on the chart. And now if I click through the plus buttons again, you can see that it's actually quite interesting, because when we reach the weekly overview, the plus button also disappears. And that's really the essence of today's tutorial and what we're trying to achieve here. Kind of the idea that prompted me to create this tutorial and this particular solution is around the real situation that I've encountered at work. So I was working with the data that had a predefined level of aggregation. It wasn't aggregated to weeks, but it was aggregated to months. And I wanted to restrict users from going deeper than the monthly view, really, because it did not make sense for the data. What's more, it was actually even confusing, because as users would click through the plus buttons to reach the daily level, the data would not change because it was already pre-aggregated on that monthly level. So it was very imperative for me at that particular situation to have more control over how those buttons work here in Tableau. But by default, unfortunately, we cannot really control what's going on with them. So first of all, I try to kind of play around with some other ideas that could potentially help me with reaching my goal. So obviously, I've started with a very simple view where I was just looking at sales by order date. And I was using continuous bill to show months. And Tableau by default creates those hierarchies with plus and minus buttons whenever you use the date field on the trend chart. So it doesn't really matter whether it's discrete or continuous, but those buttons will be kind of built in and you can interact with them. Here, for example, if I click through the final level, I can see that daily level that I actually did not want to display in my chart. But from this chart here, you can also see another reason why you might want to restrict those granularities in terms of visibility to end users. This chart is a good example where we have just too many data points. The view seems to be fairly cluttered, so perhaps it's just not the best idea to go as deep as that. And also, if you're working with timestamp fields, so date fields that do have information about hours, minutes, and seconds, Tableau will allow you to go even further to show further levels of granularities for hours, seconds, and minutes, which is definitely something that might be very confusing and might be cluttering the view even more than this. So just yet another reason why sometimes we might want to have more control as to how far those plus and minus buttons can go. So in this case, I only wanted to, I actually wanted to stop at the monthly level. So I wanted to exclude weekly and daily levels of granularity. So my first instinct was to work with order date to create a custom hierarchy. And that was my first instinct, really, to work with that. Because I figured that I'm just going to create a custom hierarchy with, the aggregation levels that are of interest to me. And I'm just going to create a similar chart, but only using those levels of granularity. So that should work, right? So I went to order date here, and I've created those custom granularities using the create custom date option. And I've selected the levels of aggregation that I was interested in, so years, quarters, and months. And you can see that I do have those fields available here already, along with some additional ones. But for now, let's just focus on those years, quarters, and months. So if you select the three of them and right-click on them and go to hierarchy, create hierarchy, and then if you just order them in the appropriate order of granularity, you can see that I've created a hierarchy, a custom hierarchy that is restricted to only years, quarters, and months. So technically, the plus button should disappear as I reach the monthly level. So let's see if that happens. If we replace the current view with our yearly pill, right? So that's what we did. It's an exact date option in here. And I can see that there is this plus button. So that seems fine. It looks like exactly what I need. And then as you will click on the plus button, you'll notice something weird happening. So now Tableau is actually exhibiting a different behavior to how it works with those default hierarchies compared to custom hierarchies. So in the default hierarchy, the yearly pill would be replaced with a quarterly pill. And then as I will click on it again, the quarterly pill would be replaced with a monthly pill. As I was working with this, to my horror, I've realized that it's actually not working in the same way when you use the custom hierarchies. Instead of replacing one pill with another, it just continues to add pills next to one another, what leads to this very weird situation where you have kind of like three charts in the same view. They all align with the same axis. So the more granular you go, the less you can really see from the chart because it becomes so flat and so tiny compared to your highest level of aggregation. So that was definitely not what I wanted, what I intended to create. And then my second step in kind of exploring different options was to select all of those three calculations and convert them to discrete. I don't know, I figured that maybe that will give me some better results. So on a yearly level, it all looks great as before. But then as I've expanded this, well, it looks different, right? Because it kind of gives me what I want in terms of continuity in the data. But it's really not working as expected because you can see that there is this weird break between data points. Obviously, this is because we're using date levels, discrete values. So that's to be expected. And then if I would maybe add also weeks to that hierarchy, let's see what happens then. You can see that, let me just change that to discrete. So you can see it becomes quite intense. We have so many labels at the bottom. It's really hard to read through this. And that weird break between points is just really not working for me. So that's also not what I want. So my final solution and the end solution, that is the kind of the focus of today's tutorial, was to create this little slider here. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about sliders in general in a second. But it's this little additional sheet that you just place on the top of your chart to control those levels of granularity. So in essence, it's really just a way of controlling a backend parameter and change its values between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however numbers of views you need, and just control it and then assign those values in the range of values that you specify within the filter to show specific level of granularity on the chart. So in my case, I only have 4 different levels of granularity. So this is as much as I want to show. I want to kind of switch between value of 0 through to 3. That gives me 4 distinct kind of values of the parameter to which I've assigned specific granularity levels of the chart. So it's not that complicated. It's actually something that has been explored in the past a lot of times, trying to assign a parameter value to different granularities. The novelty of this solution is that the slider allows us to either increase or decrease the value of parameters. So you can kind of switch from different granularities in a more structured way. So it kind of the flow of data from years to quarters, and then from quarters to months, and then the fact that the buttons are disappearing as you do not have more levels of granularity is something that is unique to this particular solution. But sliders, they do have many more use cases, really. So let's talk about this now for a second. What is a slider, and how can we use it? So a slider, in essence, is something that actually already exists in Tableau. Like in here, I've created a storyboard where I just have 3 different dashboards. And you can see that I can either click for them, or I can use those arrows that automatically appear here to switch from one slide to another. And the typical purpose of using something like this is to build a story and kind of lead users through the insights that you're trying to share with them in a more natural flow. And you can see that as I reach the last slide, the slider becomes grayed out. So it kind of tells users that there are no more slides to be explored. Similarly, on the other side here, you can see the same thing happens. You cannot click select any slides prior to the product analysis. And then if I just remove the caption boxes and show arrows only, it becomes much more similar to what we were just looking at in terms of those plus and minus buttons. So even the callout number in here tells us what exactly is happening. So as I click on one shape, so one arrow, the forward arrow, there is an increment in the number that I see, so from 2 to 3, and then clicking on the backward arrow decreases the number by 1. And this is exactly what's happening with those buttons. It's just that kind of the way it's visualized is different. So those sliders in here is something that I've already explored in the past on 2 of my dashboards, and I can show you them now. So first of all, we have the Dwight Schrute's computer. I wouldn't call it a database, but kind of like an Easter egg visualization where I wanted to create some fun elements on the desktop, including the picture gallery. And for the picture gallery, it was imperative for me to have some sort of solution that will allow me to click through the pictures in an organized way. So this is exactly where I have implemented a similar solution. So you can see as I go forward, it changes the pictures to the next one, and then moving backwards, reloads pictures in the same order. So each picture is assigned a given index, and clicking on those buttons just changes the value of the index that is in the backend. So obviously this is not a business case scenario. You probably don't have to create picture galleries. But on my more recent viz, which is this diet viz, I've implemented this on 3 out of 4 charts here on this visualization. And I think the use case here is more business appropriate. So first of all, I've used sliders and combined them with this timeline to guide users through the context on the chart. So you can see that now if I click on the forward arrow, this little annotation mark is moving along the line. So I'm highlighting some additional commentary and additional information that I want my viewers to learn from this chart. So what is interesting about this trend chart? It's not just the overall trend, but it's important to provide additional information as to perhaps why the data looks the way it does at this specific point in time. And that's what the sliders allow me to do in here. So users can either click through the different kind of pieces of information using those arrows, or they can manually click on any dot along the line if they want to skip some of the points. And you see as they reach the final point, the arrow becomes grayed out, and they can click on it, but nothing will happen because we've reached the maximum index assigned to the parameter. I did a very similar thing here where I've explored some additional information for specific meal types. So in order to highlight them, I've grayed out all the other meal types that I did not want users to focus on at any given time. And then I've added some commentary that was moving along with a specific meal type that was selected. And lastly, just to show you that it doesn't have to be created in a chronological order, that doesn't have there is no need for having a chronological order here. Really, you can just assign different categories to your timeline and just allow users to switch from one point to another in a very similar fashion. So this last example, I think, is what pretty much recreates what we have seen in the storyboard here, where you can place any dashboards on your caption boxes on your slides, and it does not have to really follow any particular chronological order if there's no need for it. Okay, so now as we have more understanding as to what sliders are and how we can use them in Tableau, let's go back to our example here and just think for a second what the benefits of using that little slider here are. So first of all, the fact that it's visible at all times is quite important, at least from my experience, because in the past, I've had many questions from my stakeholders in the business context about how they can change the levels of granularity. It wasn't very obvious to them that there were any plus and minus buttons available here that they can play around with. For the sole fact that they were hidden at all times, and only upon hovering over them you can actually see that they are included here as a default functionality. Then the control really in terms of setting those buttons. So the ability to limit number of views that you can see on the chart is definitely a huge benefit as well. And along with that comes the ability to customize labels in here and headers. So even such a simple label like maximum monthly sales, even without that number, would not be as easily achieved with a typical setup of a trend chart as we were exploring here with just sum of sales and order date. So these are some of the benefits of using that. And I think one of the important part about this is that even though it's an additional element on your dashboard, the implementation is extremely simple. And there is actually a template that will be shared with you as a part of this tutorial that you can very easily plug into and use for your own kind of problem solution. So yeah, so it will be shared, and now let's have a look if we can recreate this chart using that template so that you can do this yourself if needed. So now let me move on to another workbook, just this one. So it's a blank workbook, and we will try to create our dashboard from the scratch. And at the bottom in here, I've listed out some of the steps that we will have to follow in order to arrive at our final result. So let's get right into it. So first of all, we need sales, and we're going to drop them on rows. Next, we have order date, but we know that the order date is not really giving us what we want because we've explored some challenges of it in the past. But for now, let's just change it to a continuous bill and show it as amount of order date. And now we are going to copy the slider sheet from our template. So this is the template workbook. A brief introduction of what we have in here. This is just a sheet that shows two shapes. One is a forward arrow, one is the backward arrow. And really at the heart of this functionality here are the two parameters that you can see to the side. One is called slider index and one is called slider maximum number of views. So the maximum number of views allows us to specify what is the maximum number of granularities, or basically views, that we want to allow users to click through. In this case, we have it set at 5, and the slider index is telling us at which point between 0 and 5, and 5 being the maximum number of views, we are at the moment. So we are at the third view now. So if I click on the forward button, you can see that the number has increased to 4. If I click on it again, it increased to 5, but the arrow has disappeared because I cannot click any further. So, I can click on it, but you can see that the increment is just not taking place. I can only click on the backward arrow from now on, and I can also only click on it as long as it's not a 0. And now as I reach 0, this arrow has disappeared as well. So essentially, we are just giving users the ability to kind of move between values of 0 and 5. But if I change this to 7, for example, it very easily extends our ability to click not only through to 5, as we are now, but also through to 6, which is the value we are seeing now, and 7, and then the arrow disappears. So this is a very simple setup. And what we have to do is we have to copy that sheet. So I'm going to right-click on the slider tab and select copy. And we're going to go back to our workbook where we are trying to recreate the chart. And I'm going to right-click on the bottom ribbon and select paste. All right, so we have the slider here. It doesn't look exactly as the one on in our final viz, but let's not worry about this for now. So now we need to find some way to connect these two elements. So connect the slider, these two shapes, and our chart. And because the slider is based almost entirely on parameters, it will work with any sort of data that you have. You don't really have to restructure your data. There's no need for that. You just have to create one additional calculation to just simply tell Tableau how each value of the index parameter should be treated. So what should it represent? What sort of either granularity on your trend chart, as we will be doing in a second, or perhaps some other sort of like switching between different categories that you want to assign to those slider values. So for this, we need to create a new calculated field. And I had this field already written down so that we don't spend too much time on writing it up now. So I'm going to call it custom, oh my God, I cannot write, order date. And this is the calculation. So because parameters work across different data sources, they are not data source specific, I can very easily refer to that parameter in this calculation. So essentially what I'm saying is that if a slider index is 0, then show me the yearly view, and in order to show a yearly view, we just have to use the date trunc function where the data is truncated to years. Similarly, we do this for quarters, months, and then weeks and days. So for now, let's just keep it to show all the values, right? So we have 0 through to 4, all the different levels of granularities are available. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to drag the order date to columns and select exact date. So we have to use the exact date, and as you'll see, and I'm going to replace the month now. And now you can see that the plus and minus buttons are not available because plus and minus buttons are only available on those predefined levels of aggregation like years, quarters, and months. They are not available for exact dates, but it's not a problem for us because we can just use our sliders to control levels of granularities that we see here. So now we can create a new dashboard and just simply place our chart here and also float the slider sheet on the top of it. So I'm gonna hide the title, make it slightly smaller. I'm not bothering with changing the shapes for now, and I'm gonna place the callouts for parameters here so that we see what's going on. So now I'm going to click on the backward arrow, and you can see that the slider index changed from 3 to 2, which indicates that we're now looking at the monthly data. So as I'm hovering over those values, I can see that this data point is for 1st of April, this one is for 1st of May, 1st of June, and so on and so on. Clicking on it again changes the granularity to quarters. For now, it's not very easy to understand that these are quarters because we don't have additional headers and labels in here, but you can see that dates are changing by 3 months, so we can kind of figure out that it's a quarterly view. And finally, if I click on that arrow, there are only 2 points, which indicates we are looking at the yearly view. So now let's click on the forward button and see what's happening. For now, all of our granularities are available here. So we can see that now we are at the value of 3, which is the weekly view. So here you can hover over the points and see that there is a difference of 7 days between each point. And finally, we have that daily view that we have seen previously, and we are at number 4. What's interesting is that the forward button has not disappeared now, even though we've reached the end of kind of granularities that are available. So let's see what happens if I click on it again. If I click on it again, the chart disappears. And the reason for this is that in our custom order date calculation, we only specified granularities for up to the daily view. So there is no value available for months, for number of 5, 6, 7. So it doesn't really make sense for the slider to go as far as 7. So you can see that now as I will reach 7, this is the only moment where we can see the button disappearing. So it's really showing us too many values. And since we know we have a maximum of 4, let's change it to 4. And let's see what happens now. So if I click on it again, I've reached number 4, the daily level, the arrow disappears. And now let me show you how very quickly and easily you can adjust those levels of granularities in the view. So if you decide that, okay, actually that daily level is not necessary, I do not want users to see that, let's hide that. You can just use the / here to comment out that information to remove that. And I'm going to do the same with weeks. And let's see if I go back here and now change the number of views to 2, because that's the maximum. I have to click through to that value, but now you can see the index value is 2 and the arrow has disappeared. If I click on the backward arrow, I can see that there are only 3 levels of granularities available. These are from years through to months. And that's really all that we need in here. Then let's work on some cosmetic changes, let's say. So as I've mentioned, it's not very easy now to understand what is the level of granularity that we're working with at the moment. So for this, we can create a similar case statement, also referring to the index value, where we are just going to create labels. So this essentially just creates a string that provides us with like an appropriate label for each data point. So I'm going to call it custom order date label. And if I drag this to a tooltip, perhaps, we can see what's happening. So if I go back to my dashboard, I'm going to click on the backward arrow, and you can see that now it says Q4 2021. If I go backward again, it says 2021, and for months it will tell us that it's December 2021. So that's exactly what I wanted. I can remove that custom order date label that we have in here. So I'll just remove that. And like we can just focus on that value. And last custom calculation that I think would be quite useful is to create a header on that chart to show users at which level of granularity they are in a very quick way, so that they can quickly see what's going on. So this one will be called custom order date header. And I'm going to drag this to detail here, go to the title, and I'm going to add that value here and call it the calculation and then sales. So let's make this bold and let's see how it looks. So it says now monthly sales, and there is no doubt at which level of granularity we are. If I click on the backward arrow, it changes to quarterly and yearly sales. So exactly what I want. Now, just a couple of words about the shape of those buttons. So by default, they just use the backward and forward arrow. In my case, I have used some custom shapes that I cannot find now, but yeah, basically you can adjust them to anything you want. These are just custom shapes. You can find them on, for example, Flat Icon website, and just customize them to your needs. So for now, I think this is looking good. Obviously, on our final chart, we have slight modifications like this max monthly sales. So let's have a look at this real quick as well. So how do we add the maximum label? I'm gonna drag sales to labels, and I'm also going to drag custom order header to label. And now I'm going to go to minimum and maximum option based on sum of sales and only select the maximum value. And you can see that we have both granularity level information and sales. So if I just rename it to like quarterly max and then sales at the bottom, perhaps make this a little bigger, I don't know, like so. You can see that this is quarterly max. And then the small changes to the chart would just require us to create a dual axis where sum of sales is a dot, and just synchronizing those axes, removing one of them and removing any labels. And we kind of arrive at what we were looking at before. So I can get rid of those parameters, and that's it. So yeah, hope you like it and hope you learned something new today. If you have any questions or feedback, then please let me know. And other than that, wish you all good luck in playing around with this cool functionality. Thank you.